Okie doke. So, we're going to have a look at this exam. Oh yeah, so this is quite a nice question, yeah. So like I was saying in the video or on Tuesday, oh, not listening yet, there's typically in the exam there'll be an essay question, there'll be maybe one question that is quite math focused and a bit of discussion, and then a couple of questions where you're mixing discussion and math. This is very much a mixing one, isn't it? So what have we got? Okay, yeah. So we've got this limits to growth model with Leontief production function, exogenous growth in labor productivity, and a fixed resource. And crucially, this is open access. Yeah. And since it's costless to extract and open access, that means it's gonna have zero price. Which basically means you have to have a Leontief. What would happen if you had this and you had like some kind of CES or a Cobb-Douglas or something? What would happen to the resource? Have a think, talk to your neighbour, if you like. Did you all get the question? So, if you have this, if the resource R is free to extract and of open access character, no property rights, and if the production function was some kind of CES, and not the corner option with Leontief, what would happen to the resource stock? It's a really straightforward answer. I'm not saying it's straightforward to work out what the answer is, but it's very, very simple what would happen. Because it's unrealistic, but you think, in the model, given these, if we take all these assumptions literally. So you can think of the resource when it's free to extract, you can think of it as a cake, right? It's just like, come and get it. Whatever you want some, just come and get it. But nobody owns it, it's just sitting there. Okay. And the flow of cake into these is R. And then you've got some production function here, you've got sort of labor coming in here, and say you've got Y is ALL to the 1 minus alpha, R to the alpha. That's the aggregate production function. But actually you've got lots of small firms here, each with sort of small firm versions of that, and each getting their little bits of R. And they're competing against each other. What's going to happen to the cake? It's going to be completely depleted. No, I'm not, because. Anyone? There's something missing. Like even with Leontief, it gets completely depleted, doesn't it? It's going to get completely depleted. When is it going to get completely depleted? Instantly. Yeah. It's like, whoa! Everyone just go and grab it, yeah? it's a free-for-all. The more cake you have, the more you can produce. Everyone just piles in and grabs what they can get. And literally in the model, it'll happen instantaneously. If you take the model assumptions literally. Okay. But because we've got Leontief, there's only a certain amount of cake that is giving you any extra production, and beyond that, well, there's no point. So even though it's totally free, you can still assume, well, they're not going to take more than they sort of need, or more than they can use. Okie doke. But they will take, of course, all that they need, so to speak, to keep their labour busy up to the point at which the cake runs out. In which case, at which point, the economy falls off a cliff. And this is like, I don't know how many of you have read the Solo 73 paper. I actually read it again yesterday. The one is the end of the world at hand. So this is his big criticism of the limits to growth approach, that they're treating resources as if they're just open access. And then he's saying, look, actually people own these resources, they take out a scarcity rent or as a price for using them, and there's a scarcity rent, and the more scarce they get, the more the price will go up, and that will cause all these other mechanisms to kick in. Okie doke. And that is, okay, that's not in this model. But in a DHSS, standard DHSS, that's the big difference. Yeah. You could have in the standard DHSS, or a slightly adapted DHSS, you could have the same equations here, but then say the resource is privately owned by lots of small resource owners, and there's perfect markets, and everything, things would change massively. But in this one, as you know, what do we know about the resource stock from this one? Yeah, it's an infinite supply of a costly to extract, and then you're going to end up with a fixed resource price instead, aren't we? So what was your question?
I had a hard time finding the resource price in Model 2.
Okay. So let's just have a quick look at that. So I might end up doing this differently from in the video, which is probably just the one in that case. So I would strongly recommend you to draw a picture for this kind of thing. So we've got this sort of infinite resource stock. And we've got, this is R, L, oh yeah, and we've also got a stock of capital K, which is added to, and there's a third thing we can do with our final good, isn't it? There's three things we can do with our final good. We can send it to consumption, we can send it to investment, and we can send it as an intermediate input. And we can call I is what? From here. So what's I? Is this S-Y, I think. And that's, or is it? No. Sorry, no, that was a trickier question than I thought. Because we define I as y minus x here, don't we? Think? No. K dot, we know, must be I minus delta K, isn't it? The rate of change of the capital stock is the investment is adding to it, and depreciation is taking away. So therefore, I must be y minus x times s. So this s is the proportion of what you save after taking away x from what you're producing. Okay. Right. So how are we going to find the resource price here? So we've got a flow of inputs to the extraction sector, X, and that's the only input here. There's no labor or anything. And we've got a flow of output 5 times X. So how do we think about finding the resource price?
Is it even?
Yep.
Well, the resource price is what we devote to like labor, or the X we send to extract resources, right? So it should be, but I don't know. I didn't know how to find it because.
So there's different ways of going about it. So I mean, like normally you would set up some kind of profit maximization problem and take first order conditions. And we could do that here, but it's kind of Christoph, what do you call it? It's kind of I don't know, it's a bit pointless because you've only got one input. So there's no real optimization to be done. Unless you either have some scarcity or you have some market power. Because these people here, the owner of this sort of extraction factory, what is the problem facing that owner? If that owner had market power, it would be like, oh, how much shall I produce? How much shall I sell to maximize? If that owner had some, if there was a scarcity rent, it would again be, oh, you know, shall I sell or not, depending on what I think about what the price is doing. But here, it's just like, okay, there's still kind of a question about how much to produce. But the price is just, there's no sort of input combination or anything, is there? There's only one input. So, given that there's no scarcity and no given there's no scarcity and no market power, we can basically say that the price is equal to the marginal cost of production. Okay. And given that there's only one input and constant returns, then the price is equal to the unit cost, which is equal to total cost divided by total quantity. Okay, so you can't say this stuff as if you've got these kinds of things kicking around. But if it's throughout this course, basically, we're saying this, we're not dealing with market power. And in this model, we've got no scarcity. So then we know that the price is just going to be equal to the unit cost, which is cost divided by quantity. And when there's only one input, there's no problem, oh, how much labor shall we use, how much capital, how much the resource. It's just like the cost is the amount of the input you use times its price. So, sorry, let's just stop there and go back. Just look at the units here. So total cost is like dollar, whatever the monetary units are, dollars per year or something. The total cost of production per year or per period. And the total quantity could be like tons per year, couldn't it? Which is giving you dollars per ton price. Yeah. So then what is the price? So what are total cost? Yeah, everyone work out the price. And then we'll move on. I'm going to come around and hassle you. Probably, I guess you're ready for the video. So what do you reckon? So total cost. What's your input? Right. And what's the price of that? It's the same as the price of the final good, isn't it? And that's normalized.
Fuska kan ju svaret så på det. Jag vet vilka det där är. Och det är det jag undrar också. För att över hela kusten, jag vet inte. För att jag vill ju sätta något sådär dubbeldelande framför.
Ja, jag skulle ju
You put in X input.
Ja,
How many tons of output? That's the bottom line. So what have you got? Nothing. So did you hear what I was saying? To
I heard at the beginning.
so your costs are the quantity of the input, which is X, times its price, which is 1, because it's the final good, the price of which is all. And then how much, that's the top line. And given that you've used that amount of input, what's your total quantity and how much you get out? That's your bottom line. You got it?
yeah, I think so. But
Yeah.
also I remember that it's only
Yeah,
there.
sure.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
my question is, or why I get confused, I think is that we could like normalize it to 1.
Yeah. Okie doke. So the answer is, if we're using a quantity of input X, we're going to get a quantity of output phi X. And the cost of this quantity of input X is 1 times X, because the price of the final good is normalized to 1. So that's crucial. Okie doke. So, what do we get? In the first model we get, on a log scale, we kind of get like this. Y R WR. But then at some point, we fall off a cliff, don't we? But in the second model, we get indefinitely. Of course, this isn't strictly right, actually, because the log of 0 is minus infinity. So you can't really, but in a way, what I'm trying to show is that the resource price is constant. It's actually 0. So you would have a horizontal line going along at minus infinity somehow. But of course, so they're both sort of matching that data, and this is saying we're heading up towards the edge of the cliff, and this is saying everything's fine. And then we say, well, neither of them much use, because they don't include the mechanisms. Solow sort of says, look, this is rubbish because resources are actually treated as scarce, and they're not just free, they have a price, and as they get scarce, the price is going to go up, and that will lead to all this adaptation. And if we take this model and put in those mechanisms and say that, look, actually the resource isn't infinite, it's like this, then we can start doing stuff. So what else do we need to add to this? We can make the resource stock look like this, but that's not enough, is it? Just very briefly.
Well, we can add to model 2 to make it like a real world economy, or is that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay, from Solow's 3 mechanisms.
Yeah, to capture the mechanisms.
So you could introduce alternative resources.
Yeah. So we can add, so we've got a limited stock of some resource, but we then got alternatives as well. Maybe that we can switch to renewables. So that's one thing.
You can introduce, now I already know the answers.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah,
You can introduce,
everyone knows this.
or maybe but also like technological change, like maybe a DTC model, so you can improve your resource efficiency.
Yeah, and what do we need to do to the production function then, if that's going to make any sense? So we had a Cobb-Douglas before, right?
Yeah. You need a CES.
Yeah. And what value of epsilon are we going to have? We can drop capital kind of because it's not too important. And then we could say, look, ALL to the epsilon plus ARR to the epsilon. So the 1 over epsilon. And for this, what value of epsilon should we have? Or should it, so Cobb-Douglas is 0, isn't it? And then that you have this math thing that I never showed you, that it goes to Cobb-Douglas. For this to make sense, this is like labor and oil, say, what value of epsilon do we need?
Should be
Negative epsilon, yeah. But then, to capture these alternatives, we could say that R is what? Say R is we're treating this as electricity. So we've got a kind of intermediate sector here making electricity out of either this or this. What kind of function could we have for that? So we could have another CES. If we wanted to make it really easy for ourselves, what could we do? No, that wouldn't. I mean, we could, but it wouldn't be great.
You could just add them, like efficient wind power.
We could assume like perfect substitutability. We did that in the EKC model, didn't we? We just said, look, you can make electricity with coal, you can make it with wind, doesn't matter which is a simplification. But then you just have like sort of I don't know, we need some, or you could even have like AR1, R1 plus AR2, R2 or something, if you want. Or you could do a CES, but then what value, oh, not epsilon, we've already got epsilon. Eta instead, what value would you choose for eta then? So here epsilon is negative, yeah? What about eta?
So could we say they're perfect substitutes?
That's what we had just now, yeah. And then eta would be 1.
Yeah.
Then we're just adding up. But if we're going to not do that and have something a bit more complicated,
Positive.
right, then we want eta to be positive. Because that means then if one of these gets cheaper, you use loads more of it. Because they're good substitutes. And actually you're spending, something gets cheaper and you spend more on it. Which makes sense if they're good substitutes, right? But if they're not so good substitutes, something gets cheaper, you spend less on it. Because you buy a bit more, but not that much more. So like oil gets cheaper compared to labor, firms spend less on oil. Oil gets cheaper compared to coal, firms spend more on oil. Okay, and then the third thing is the alternative products, yeah. Okie doke. So we ended up spending a fair bit of time on that anyway, but it's kind of a pretty massive question really. Well, a lot of these questions cover a lot. Yeah, most of the questions in the exam in a way are really like covering a lot of important stuff that I want you to understand. So in a way you can take almost any exam question like we did last time. We just took an exam and it's like, well, wow, this is all important stuff, and oh, this is important stuff. Which makes sense, it's what I'm trying to do in the exam. I'm trying to test the key stuff in the course. So. Okay, so what do we got here? Right, I don't really recognise this question yet. It's a shame it's across 2 pages. I might have to display it differently. Maybe we can do it. Oops. One. Okay, I think that's the question, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, right, yeah, now I see what question it is. So this is kind of similar to the question 2 we went through on Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume that you're going to look at the video from Tuesday. So I'll bear that in mind. Okay, so we've got a single product, hammers. production function CS with inputs of labour Ly and iron R. Factor augmenting technology levels AL and AR. Can be written blah blah blah. The price of hiring labour is normalized to AL. Yeah, okay. So I wanted to do a similar question but different to make you think. So this was like this was probably new for this exam. Iron is extracted from infinite homogeneous stocks by firms. Okay, yeah, right. So this is the iron mine. So can you just draw me some lines and some equations and things? Have a think about that. Meanwhile, I'll read the rest of the question. But this is like the math. This is the math question, isn't it? And of course, I can kind of do this kind of thing because I know that you've got a choice. Yeah? So if you're not so strong on the math, maybe you're thinking, But then, of course, if you have that as a strategy for the exam, it's risky because then you have to do the other three questions. You don't really, if you already know from before you go into the exam that you're not going to do the sort of math question, then you're stuck with the other three. And it could be that it's one of the other three which I decided this time to make kind of trickier, or maybe I didn't even need to make it trickier, but it just turned out, wow, they found this really hard. So is this your...
Yes. Is AR and AL assuming to be exogenous together?
I guess at the moment, and then we make them exogenously.
Right. So at the moment it should look like this.
So you've got labour coming in here, is that right?
Well, we got Ly and R. No, LR.
Iron is extracted. Yeah, good. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So I'm not going to go around everybody this time. So, obviously, as usual, we've got some Y coming out here, yeah? And we've got some labour coming in here, and what do we call that labour? We call it Ly, don't we? And we've got a flow of iron coming in there, and those are the two inputs, aren't they? But then the question is, where is this coming from? So in the classic DHSS, this would be like cake, and you just grab it. There's no inputs, but there's the scarcity. Sometimes, in the previous question, we had that you put final goods in here as your input. But here, we're putting labour in, aren't we? And we can see that here. Well, actually, we're not even told what total labour is, are we? Okay. set up the representative Hammer-Reducer's static profit maximization problem and use it to derive an expression for the relative factor shares of labour and iron. Okie doke. So I think I'm going to stick with not going through the math. But maybe we should just say a couple of things about the math. Or I don't know, is there any questions about the math?
I think, because in part 1, I think when you're supposed to find the relative factor shares, or yeah, I think we solve it with like, we keep R in the function like all the time and never put in like the expression for R, right? Do you understand? Or
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Keep going. Or
no, that was only the question because I got confused when to put in like the expression for R and when not to. Yeah.
Yeah, so what have we got? Derive an expression for the relative factor shares of labour and iron in terms of AL, AR, LY and R. So it's in terms of the quantities of the inputs and not the prices.
Okay, yeah, okay, so you can only, yeah. Sure. Also I got
So
more.
basically we've got pi is y minus WL LY plus WRR, right? And then we do the first order condition, and I hope you all need to have this kind of nailed down in terms of differentiating this with respect to LY and R, right? And you end up with what you've got in the square brackets to the 1 over epsilon minus 1, which is the same as 1 minus epsilon over epsilon. So you've got the square brackets to the 1 minus epsilon over epsilon, which is y to the 1 minus epsilon. Because y is the square brackets to the 1 over epsilon. You need to have that like taped.
But we can do that in the exam as well, right? Show it by square brackets and then like the step, or which steps should we show in the exam?
You don't need to show much.
Okay.
Because like, yeah, if you've got a grip on it in your head, you shouldn't need to write down very much.
Yeah.
So it's like the pi, the Ly is basically y to the 1 minus epsilon times 1 over epsilon, but then that cancels out, and then it's Ly to the epsilon over Ly minus WL equals naught, and therefore you can just go there, and you could even just you could even just write that down, but don't try to memorize this, okay? It's because if you're writing that down, it's because you can do the steps in your head because they're so familiar, but it's not like, oh, I just remember this is the answer. That's not a good strategy. You're going to get yourself, apart from, of course, I don't want you to do that because you're not learning, but you're going to get yourself confused. And don't try to memorize results like this, please. It's not going to work.
Can you explain again why it's 1 minus epsilon on the y? Because I looked at that yesterday and I haven't understood exactly how it works out.
Okay, we can look at it quickly, but really you should look at the videos.
Yeah.
So I don't know which would be the best video. Maybe you could talk to some of the others too.
Yeah, I got one.
Okay.
But it's pretty clear once you look at it like 2 times or something.
Yeah.
So actually, maybe you could just do that.
Yeah. No, it doesn't
So do
matter.
you know which one it is?
I think it's 2.9 in the exercises, but also you have one in your, but I don't remember that one. I'm not exactly sure, but I think so.
Yeah. So let's just check that.
I could actually look.
No, I don't mind doing it, but I just think it's probably it's better just to look at the video.
Yeah, it's 2.9.
Oh yeah, well if you're sure then we don't need to look at it. Okay. So then we do the symmetrical thing for the first order conditions in R, and we get y to the 1 minus epsilon AR R to the epsilon is WR. And putting those together, divide one by the other, we get WLLY over WRR is ALLY over ARR to the epsilon. But then we need to use, these should be our only unknowns, right? Oh yeah, which they are at the moment, because this is just the relative shares, isn't it? Okay. Then if we just multiply each side by that, we end up with an expression in terms of, we get rid of these quantities and have an expression with the prices instead. Then we need to find the price of I and WR, which is the same logic as before. But now the input is LR and not X. So what's the cost of using an input quantity LR? Have a think about that. So the price here is going to be Can you write me out an expression? Spend 5 minutes on this, okay, and then we'll take a break. WR is, in general terms, something divided by something, and then specifically in this case, something divided by something. So this is general, given perfect markets, no scarcity. And then this is the specific case. What do you go to first?
Okay. I miss Janina first. Yeah.
What have you got?
No, I just wrote the thing.
Yep, that's the first one. Yep. Okay. It is as well, but that's, wow, how to explain that? So So we've got these competitive resource producers hiring labor, digging stuff up, telling their labor force to dig the stuff up and send it off to the factories. And then the question is, what are they charging the factories per ton? Okay, and because they're competitive and there's no scarcity rent, they're going to charge their unit cost. Okay, so the question then is, going back a step, the question was, what are they going to charge? Okay, these competitive owners of the resources. And because they're competitive and because there's no scarcity rent, they're going to charge unit cost, which is total cost divided by total quantity. Okay. And then the next question is, what is total cost and what is total quantity? And because the input here is labor, we need to think carefully. When the input was final goods, we just said the price is 1. But we can't do that with labor, right? No, no, no. You look satisfied.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Hold down, yeah. And that's just how much you produce given the amount of input. Okay. So we call the amount of input that the representative firm uses, we call that LR. Okay? So that is kind of, we don't know how big that is, but we know what it's called. It's called LR, and it's some quantity, some number, if you like, 10 people or whatever. LR. And how much is that going to cost? It's going to cost the wage times LR. And what's the wage? We're actually told that it's AL. Does that make any sense? Why would the wage be AL? It's kind of a leading question. It ought to make sense since I put it into the exam and told me to assume it. So what is AL in words? Perfect. Labor productivity. So what is that saying? It's saying if you double labor productivity, what happens to the wage? It doubles. Does that make sense? So the average wage in Sweden compared to the average wage in China, say, and the average labor productivity in Sweden compared to the average labor productivity in China. Do you think that's roughly the same? Well, it is. Because basically, labor is the biggest cost that firms have. So, when labor productivity goes up, wages tend to go up by pretty much the same amount. Okie doke. And of course, this sector is going to be dominant in a typical economy. This sector is employing much more labor than this one. So when labor productivity here goes up, that's going to drive the overall wage up for all workers. And these guys are going to have to pay more to attract people to come here and work because these guys can earn more here. Okay, and then given that we've used the quantity LR of labor as our input here, how much R do we get out? Elin knows anyway. Did the rest of you get it? Or?
ALLR.
Right, except it's a phi. But these Greek letters are tricky. Not necessary to pass the exam, luckily. But that's phi and that's theta.
Right, you say feet, right? Yeah, feet.
You said, I think you said.
I didn't say theta, I said feet.
Oh,
Like
okay.
theta instead.
You said phi, right? Sorry. Then you were right all along. Yeah, you can say phi is fine. Sorry, I thought you said. Right. Yeah. Phi or phi, AL, LR. And then those go out, so it's just 1 over phi, or 1 over phi. So you end up with the same answer as if you'd assumed that the final goods were coming in and being used instead. Okie doke. I was wondering if I wanted to say it a tiny bit more, but I think we'll just take a break. When should we kick off again? 25 past? Does that make sense? Yep. Okie doke. So again, I'm not going to go through the sort of math as such, but I've decided I am going to take you through the steps of the math, so to speak. So we had this result from the first order conditions. So does this make any sense? So if Ly, for instance, goes up, so there's suddenly a lot more labour around, what happens to the factor share of labour? So Ly went up, there's suddenly more labour. What happens to the share of labour? The cost share, the factor share. Does it go up or down? According to this.
Goes down.
It goes down because epsilon is negative, yeah? Does that make sense? We've got labour and sort of oil or something. Oh, it's iron, isn't it? Yeah. They're strongly complementary, they're not very good substitutes. So it's like labour and oil, isn't it? It's like, or left and right shoes, if you like. You've suddenly got more labour, but the quantity of labour compared to iron is not going to change much. It's just, oh great, the labour got cheaper. There's more of it, it gets cheaper, we spend less on it. Share goes down. Okay, then we do this little mathematical trick by multiplying through. It's told exactly what to do here, and you end up with this. So now instead of quantities we've got prices. So then imagine the price of labour goes up. I said here the quantity of labour goes up. If the price of labour goes up, what happens to the factor share of labour? Holding everything else the same. Okay. AR, AL and WR all stay the same, but this goes up. What's going to happen to the factor share of labour? So you need to work out the sign of this, don't you? Is this negative or positive? Someone? Epsilon's negative, yeah? top line here is negative, and the bottom line is positive. So it's negative. So then when WL goes up, this is negative, this whole thing is going to go up or down. WL goes up. So what's this going to do when WL goes up? So this goes down, right? And then with that added, it goes up. So when labour gets more expensive, the share of labour goes up. Which is what we'd expect, yeah? Because again, they're poor, substitute, strongly complementary. Labour gets more expensive. Oh God, we've got to spend more hiring labour. This is the kind of thing you might want to do in the exam. Ideally, you could do this in like 5 seconds. Yeah. Oh yeah, this makes sense. Okay. Then we said, find the price of iron, and that's 1 over 5. We've done that. Substitute in, so your answer to part 2, to explain, get a new expression. So what's that? WR is 1 over 5. What's WL? It's just AL, isn't it? So we've got AL, 1 over 5, AR. Okay? So then we can just write that as 1 over AR times 5. So increasing labour productivity doesn't affect the shares because it increases the price of labour as well as when AL goes up, WL goes up. Okay. So is this model fitting the data? Remember the aggregate data? Is it fitting the aggregate picture? Have a think, chat to your neighbour. Everyone should be able to answer that.
Vilken slide är vi på?
Är
Är det där?
Det är samma uttryck.
Ja,
Där är
precis.
AB.
Ska man ta
Ja.
där försvinner
Tack.
Tack.
Gustav spotted my deliberate mistake, which was I dropped this stuff, didn't I? It would have been a bit of a disaster. That would like sabotage the rest of the question. That's one of the slightly tricky things about this question. That it's a long chain of reasoning, and if you screw up at some point, it makes it tricky. I kind of tried to deal with that by saying you should find that the factor share of labour is 90%. Unfortunately, I remember from the exam it didn't really help. Because people who found some other factor share, or students, they just carried on anyway with the factor share they found. for the second part. Whereas they should have, even if you find some other factors shared, the first thing you should do is try and sort of find out where you went wrong, and the second thing, even if you can't find that, is you use this result for here. But that didn't really happen, if I remember rightly, which was unfortunate. Okay, back to my question. Does the model fit this sort of very rough overall picture of the long run? So what's this? That's the resource price, isn't it? So does the model fit that? Yeah. And then we've got resource quantity and GDP. Is the model going to fit those? We haven't actually worked them out. I think you're supposed to in the question. It is going to fit those. You've got this exponential growth in productivity. Which is going to drive. You're going to have fixed quantities of labor here and here. Both of these are getting more and more productive, so with a fixed number here, you're going to get exponentially increasing R, exponentially increasing effective labor inputs, AL, LY, exponentially increasing Y. Okay. And then when we put the numbers in, you should find that this is like 1. Okay, yeah, so this is epsilon's minus 1, so this is minus 1 over 2. So that's minus a half. So if we turn it over, it's AR phi. It's the square root of AR phi, isn't it? And we should have 9 to 1. So this AR phi should be 81. Phi is 81, AR is 1, yeah. Okay. So does that make sense? That the share of labor is 90% and the share of iron is 10%? If we're thinking about some real economy. I mean, obviously this is massively simplified, but comment on that. So what
should be even more labor?
You could say, yeah, in a typical economy, all the natural resources that we use in the typical economy, roughly what do we spend on them in percentage terms?
Didn't you say like 3?
3 to 5 most of the time. It depends a bit on the oil price, or a lot, because it's dominated by energy actually. Okie doke. So that's part A. So the individual steps, there's nothing that hard, but it's just quite daunting, I would say, to go through all this. I think that's the problem, really. And it's the same for part B. You see, the 10 islanders work in the research sector, and they have these knowledge production functions, and assume that relative investments, ZL and ZR, T plus 1, are equal to the relative shares in period T. Okay. And we've got period T. The shares in period T are 9 to 1, aren't they? 9 on labour to 1 on iron. And we're told there's 10 researchers. So what's ZL T plus 1 going to be, and what ZR T plus 1 going to be? Do you all see what it's going to be? Or 9 and 1, yeah. So this makes sense. Firms are spending 9 times more on labour than they are on the resource, iron, so they're sort of 9 times keener to increase labour efficiency than they are to increase iron efficiency. And they end up sending 9 researchers to the labour efficiency improvement sector, so to speak, and only 1 to the iron efficiency improvement sector. And then we can just stick these numbers in here, can't we? So then, and of course, I put a fair bit of thought into this, what's going to happen to AR over time?
It's going to stay nothing.
It's going to flatline, isn't it? Yeah, it's going to stay constant. And what's going to happen to AL over time? How much is it going to go up in percent? So it's 9 times this, isn't it? Which is 0.018.
Yeah.
Added to that, so that's 998 plus 18 is 1016. 1.016, which is 1.6%, which is, I think, what you said. Well, if we're doing it in English, then it should really be like this. 1.6% per year, or per period, which suggests that we should be interpreting these periods as years. Maybe we're told they're years, probably. Yeah, I think we are, aren't we? I don't know. Whatever. Okay, so what happens to the factor shares? So this is how much we invest. This is what happens to the productivities. What happens to the factor shares of labour and iron? Elin wants to say something.
Oh, no. But maybe they will be constant.
Yeah. They're not nothing. Diddly squat. So then, what's going to happen the next period? What's going to happen to the vector shares between period t plus 1 and t plus 2? Yes, this is part 2, really.
Won't you just keep on being constant?
We're just going to go along that way, aren't we? So, if we go back, well actually, yeah, in fact I asked this question too early, didn't I? Because we didn't actually have any technological progress. When I asked this question, we didn't have any technological progress. But now we do, yeah. That's why I had to start waving my hands around when I got to these bits. Because we didn't really have the information at that point. I'd forgotten that. But now we've got the information we need, don't we? Now we can say not just that WR is constant, but that Y and R are going to go up like this. Because we've got balanced growth, these are going to stay the same, AR is constant, AL goes up, and so basically, for balance, this and this need to go up at equal rates. This one goes up because of AL going up. This one goes up because of R going up. And Y grows at the same rate. Okay. What if iron starts to run out and its price for some reason starts to increase? Well, because it's running out, maybe it's getting deeper to dig it up, the price starts going up at a constant rate. What's going to happen? In terms of Solos mechanisms, roughly what's going to happen? So this gets more expensive. Which mechanism is going to kick in here? There's only one of those mechanisms in the model here, isn't there? There's nothing to switch to, and there's no alternative products. But what is there? We can switch researchers, can't we, into the AR sector. When R starts increasing in price, this is no longer going to hold. The share of iron is going to start to increase, right? If we go back to here, and look, WR starts rising, the share of iron is going to start rising, we're going to start shifting researchers into the iron sector. And actually, if you're really onto it, you can see that we're going to end up with like 5 researchers in each sector, and that they'll both go up by 0.8% a year, and you'll end up in balanced growth again. What I really wanted to do was have a part C and then say, like, discuss the relevance of the model to understanding real economists. But it's like I couldn't do that, and then I had to have 2 questions somehow. But imagine that I'd had a part C like that. Have a think about that. Have a chat while I get the top off. Think about this. Try and remember from the course what we've said about this kind of model. Okay, have a think about it. Have you got the question? So it's like, discuss the relevance of the model to real economists. If you can, try and have a chat amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
Two things.
Any thoughts?
So we don't know what he's looking for. Because it's
Well, I think maybe right now we don't have a problem with that we're running out of, that we don't have any scarcity with iron and stuff. If you're thinking if we would think about the third one.
That the efficiency of R will keep rising without any scarcity probably rising. Or like today prices don't rise, but we still, like the efficiency we use R instead.
yeah.
And we only have one resource.
Yeah.
So maybe one thing Great.
And then like Alfie, in his exam answers, when he talks about relevance of models, he kind of says that they're quite relevant, all models, even though he doesn't seem to like them on lessons.
Yeah, it's always like he's dissing all the models. So.
Yeah, so I like when I did the exams, I also did the models, and I looked this answer and was like, oh no, this kind of is, does predict.
Yeah, it's the shittiest model I've ever seen.
No, but his problem is the models do predict, but they don't have realistic assumptions, so that's the reason they predict it, like they kind of
Yeah, so maybe he was talking about that if they explain the real world or if they just match the data, because like if it matches the data, then it's kind of pointless as well. Like it's only if it has some kind of explanatory power that it's a good model, I suppose.
But this is not it.
Hmm?
This is not very realistic. Like it's very
What is
This was a tough question.
what is unrealistic about it?
no alternative resources.
Yeah, that's one.
I
Why
think it's
final
something.
problem? Yeah,
It's like
okay.
we should have-
Like I should come up with something. You weren't here, so you can
Emphasize
say
development.
No new thoughts, no?
Okay, what have you got for me?
I don't think very much.
Who wants to be a spokesman or spokesperson? Good stuff.
Janina.
Janina.
Why?
Because
Please
you
say a
said,
lot.
no, you said the smartest things.
No, I think that was Elin. No, I think it was Alexander. No, we start to say like the obvious things, like we only have one good and one resource, which makes it unrelevant.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, we've only got one of the three mechanisms, if you like. But maybe this one is the most important one. Because it's kind of cool, this model, isn't it? That when we work through the case when the resource has a fixed price. And then we got this. And then we sort of say, well, if the resource price should at some point turn up, then we're going to end up with this instead. Okay, that. You're going to reallocate resources and you're going to make AR and AL rise at the same rate then if the prices of WR and WL rise at equal rates. Then AL and AR are going to end up rising at equal rates, and R and L will both be flat, and you'll still have balance. Yeah. So now the prices are tracking each other. AR and AL track each other, and these two are both constant. So it's kind of cool, and we've got this mechanism for how the economy can adapt. But is this really the key? And of course, yeah, it's good that you're thinking, but it's only one of the three mechanisms. But maybe this one's the most important. So if we go back to just explaining this, is this kind of a good explanation for why our resource use has tracked GDP? Is it because resource prices have been constant, which have caused a failure to invest in resource efficient technology, and therefore slow growth of resource efficient technology, and therefore increasing resource use? Is that what we see when we look deeper into the data? You're right, which is why I'm asking you.
Because we see AR, I think, increasing over time.
So we've seen that. I've demonstrated that very clearly in one sector, haven't I? In the kind of energy sector, I spent a lot of time. We haven't really, it's not really nearly as clear cut in the iron sector or in the sort of more the mineral sectors, metals and so on. But I still think I haven't done that research, and I don't think anyone else has. But I think you would end up coming to similar conclusions. We can do incredibly much more with a ton of coal today compared to what we could 200 years ago in terms of generating electricity, moving things around, you know. And I think it's pretty obvious we can do an incredibly much more with a ton of iron as well. So we sort of should be getting way more GDP out of each ton of iron because we can use it so much more efficiently. But for some reason we don't. We're using about the same number of tons of iron per unit of GDP today as we were 200 years ago. That's what this is showing. But it's not because we haven't developed the skills and the knowledge to use iron more efficiently. We have, but we've not chosen to implement that knowledge or it's been swamped by other changes. So 200 years ago, we spent most of our effort growing oats and eating porridge. We didn't need a lot of iron for that, right? But over time, as we've got richer, we decided we want cars and trains and planes and God knows what. More and more iron-intensive stuff. So the fact that this mechanism is missing is super important. It's like a massive, massive weakness in terms of explaining why iron use has tracked GDP. And more subtly, this is overstating the possibilities for the changing direction of technological change. Because what tends to happen in reality is that both of these go up over time. It's like the tide lifting all the boats. Yeah, are just the increase in knowledge in general about how to handle the resources at our disposal, inventing computers, etc., raises the efficiency with which we can use all our different inputs together. Okay, so that would have been part C, which I really wanted to ask, but then that question would have gone completely out of hand. It was tough enough as it was. Okay, questions on that?
I was just thinking that also, it's a bit random maybe, but say computers these days are so much smaller than they used to be, so that must be like that you're using definitely less resources for the same unit.
Right. So computers have got a lot smaller. So yeah, absolutely. So we can get we have the opportunity to get out more value from less physical inputs, like telephones and etc. have got way smaller as well. But then what do we use the computer for? We sort of stream films that are sitting on the server in Canada maybe. So then there's a lot of electricity. Our use of computers is then ending up using a lot of electricity, for instance. I don't know what point I'm trying to make there. I guess the point you're trying to make, which is correct, is that we do see this AR increasing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So I totally agree. Okay. So I really wanted to do that part C, even though it didn't. Yeah, I wasn't too happy with this question in the end, but because it was too much math and not enough discussion. But having got you all that way, there was no time left to actually. Okay, should we go on to another question? Or is there more questions or comments on this one? But as you can see, like, sort of Solo's mechanisms, if you've got a grip on those, that's it's really, really central in the course and to a lot of these questions. Okay. So this is from that paper. To the extent that it is impossible to design around or find substitutes for expensive natural resources. So he's ticked off some of his other mechanisms here already, earlier. And then he's saying, so this is like using them more efficiently. And this is using something else. So that's two of the three, isn't it? But if those two are taken out of the equation, there's still a third one up in our. We've got a third one up our sleeves. Sometimes the same expressions exist in Swedish and English.
Changing the pattern of consumption.
Right.
Directly consumption.
Yeah. The prices of commodities that contain a lot of them will rise relative to the prices of other goods and services. Consumers will be driven to buy fewer resource-intensive goods and more of the other things. So this is Solo arguing that we're not going to go off the cliff. The most fundamental thing he says is that, look, resources, when they get scarce, the price is going to go up. Then he says, and when that happens, these other mechanisms are going to kick in. But if we look historically, has this happened? Have consumers been driven to buy fewer resource-intensive goods and more of other things? No. It's the opposite, right? They've shifted into resource-intensive goods. Does that mean that Solo was wrong? So I think he's...
No, I think it was Gustav, but...
Sorry.
No.
No. Do you want to expand on that? I agree, totally.
Well, I think he's probably right. It's just that we haven't come to the point where we have scarcity, right? So.
Right. The resource prices haven't gone up, have they? So therefore, this mechanism hasn't kicked in. That would be the sort of instant answer, but then we're going to have to think more deeply to get a good answer to this question. But this is So if we think about part A part 1, so to speak, what has in fact happened to the consumption rate of energy intensive goods compared to GDP growth over the last 150 years? Okay, yeah, now this is really good. So, this picture again. Is the answer to that question here? Think about it. Think about it for a minute. I can talk to you. You had an instant answer. I'm trying to whisper it. Okay. But then is it directly in there? So, is the answer to this question directly? Can you read it off this? Alexander says maybe not. What do the rest of you think? Elin, did you have?
I think no.
No? What do the rest of you say? And more votes? No? You don't know. Janina?
No.
No? You go with the crowd. No. Yeah, the answer's no. So, but it's really good I thought about this because the answers to this in the exams have been pretty poor. And I've asked this question a few times, and they've been pretty poor pretty much every time, I think. So if we're going to label these, what are the labels for the approximate historical trends? So this one, and this one, these two. Right. And what's this? What has in fact happened to the consumption rate of energy-intensive goods compared to GDP growth? It's not the same thing, is it? So this would be energy. So, next question, what has actually happened to the consumption rate of energy-intensive goods compared to GDP growth? Think about that. I'll come round again and talk to you. I can't go and get another cup of tea, so I could go and get a muffin, I suppose. I'm not actually that keen. How do you say sugan in English? I had 2 muffins yesterday, so none today. I already lost track of my question. What was my question? Yeah, so what has happened to the consumption rate of energy-intensive goods? This is the consumption rate of energy. What has happened to the consumption rate of energy-intensive goods? Actually, why don't you all just draw this and then draw me a line for that? So then I don't have to talk to you so much and you can actually think. And do talk amongst yourselves, of course, if you want to. Alexander is the form.
But I'm not sure.
student.
I'm thinking this.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I think so Janina's got something to say. I think I can see where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a lot of sense. It's not what I would have drawn, but it's close to what I would have drawn.
No.
So that's what I would draw. Yeah, so you've got what the other guys drew.
Aha.
Have you got something?
Men eftersom det är långt måste vi...
Yeah, no, so that's the is the one that you
Så du menar att du tog den där?
Det här är min
Men det är din egna. Ja.
I mean, it shouldn't be, it's not like it should be down, but it should be... Yeah, good, yeah. Okay. So the point is, if we remember the last question, what's happened to AR, energy efficiency of individual goods? What would the line for that look like? Not like this, right? Which is what we had in the previous model. It's like definitely increasing. Maybe we don't really know. It's hard to say exactly what slope. But we could just say equal to these, at least probably. So then you'd think if AR is going up and tracking AL, you'd think that R would be flat. But both AR and R have gone up. So what must be happening to the balance of consumption? It's shifting the whole time towards the energy intensive goods. So we're shifting, it's not growing, the energy intensive goods aren't just growing linearly along with GDP growth, we're shifting the whole time into those sectors. So they're growing faster. So that's what I was after, sort of YE or something. That's what I was thinking. But if you think of any specific energy intensive good, then it's actually different. Like if you think about flights, and maybe this is where you guys were coming from. Yeah, that's really good. Well done. So then, but actually you still didn't really get it right, but I could see where you're coming from, because it's the log scale that is screwing you there. Oh, well, let's narrow this down. Let's say 1900. So passenger air travel. How is that actually going to look on a log scale? So these guys, they drew something like this, which makes sense on a linear scale. There was like it was like 0, and then like taking off. But of course the log of 0 is minus infinity. So actually it should have been, in that case, if you're taking a specific good, it should be more like this. So any specific energy intensive good is going to come from like nowhere at some point, rise extremely steeply, and then at some point it'll probably level off because it's just become an ordinary good. It could be that it even goes down because we move on to something even more energy intensive and stop even using it. Like you can imagine, it's not the case, but you can imagine like trains or something. In the 1800s, they were like, this is the big energy intensive thing, we're shoveling thousands of tons of coal into our trains. People are piling onto the trains, they're using a lot of energy. But then, at some point it could be that actually, we move into cars instead, and then the trains go down and the cars come up. And then maybe we shift to the planes. The total kind of looks like this. But this is sort of quite, I'm putting it in scare quotes. I don't think there's a Swedish word for that. Do you know what I mean? It's like you put it in quotes, but it's a kind of meaning that, well, this is a bit vague, or we don't really mean this exactly. You can call that scare quotes. It's like, not quite sure how to define exactly what this really is, but something. But in words, what has in fact happened to the consumption rate of energy intensive goods compared to growth is been faster than GDP growth. Or we moved, the pattern of consumption has shifted towards energy intensive goods, so their consumptions grow faster than overall GDP. What has caused, so hardly anybody when I've asked this question has got that. What's caused the change? So yeah, quite a tough question this actually, wow. But of course, this one is one that has come back. This is like, you've seen it before, you know. I think, you know, even in 2018, I'd asked the same question before in 16. Thoughts about that? What's caused it?
Maybe I'm wrong, but haven't you talked about like two especially effects, like the income effect, some kind of income effect, and some kind of substitution effect?
Right. And how much, very broadly, like how much do we really know about which of those is strongest? Is this like totally nailed down and agreed in the literature, or is it like, no? So we don't really know. But we can speculate based on the evidence we've got. So if we're going to speculate, what can we? So this is the basis of the answer is kind of what we've already just ticked off. That they could both be relevant, and it's a matter of debate which is most important. But if we want to say a bit more.
Easiest to explain these graphs would be the income effect. So it was like I would focus on that.
So the income effect is super intuitive, yeah. Sort of rich people like energy intensive stuff. If I can afford it, I like flying places, for instance. And plus, there's a problem with the substitution effect idea, which is like, how much have the prices of energy intensive goods really gone down? Must be the heating system, I guess. First I thought it was the blinds getting stuck, but I think it's the radiator.
It's only a problem in this room.
Is it?
Yeah, I haven't noticed it in any other room. But it's always a problem in this room.
It could be that it just needs bleeding. Whatever you call that. Lufta. Den måste luftas. Skulle kunna vara. In English you say blödas. Or in UK English anyway. I don't know what you say in Canada. Maybe you're not an expert on vatten och avlopp plumbing. Anyway, back to the subject. Yeah, so there's this the problem with the substitution effect is, like, how big are the changes in price, really? Especially with the rebound idea. So there's a rebound idea that, you raise energy efficiency, the price of energy intensive stuff goes down, and everyone piles into that stuff. So you get rebound. But the problem is that even flights, roughly what is the factor share of fuel in your passenger air ticket? How much of that costs when you buy an air ticket? How much of that is going to pay for the fuel, roughly? We talked about it a couple of times.
Yeah.
So. Is it like 1%, 99%, 90%.
Not much. Like 4, 3 maybe.
I think, so what we said is 20%. Okay.
20.
So if you think the average overall for energy is like 5%-ish. So flight's obviously going to be a lot more than that. You know, it's an energy intensive sector, but it turns out it's only about 20%. Which means that even if planes get a lot more energy efficient, it doesn't have that big an effect on the price of the tickets. But what it could be is that capital intensive sectors get cheaper, not because of just energy efficiency, but just the sort of capital intensive sectors overall have got cheaper, and those sectors are also energy intensive. And that could save the substitution effect in a way. There's definitely a role to both. And it's pretty, in theory, you know, it could be either or both, but we don't really know. And the evidence is not that very thick. Okay. So, Solow sort of said, look, consumers are flexible. When resources get scarce, they'll move out of the resource-intensive sectors. But now we're saying consumers are shifting their patterns of consumption, and we're trying to get carbon emissions down. Why might the patterns of consumption of consumers' shifting patterns make it tougher? It has to do with the income and substitution effects, right? So Solow's sort of saying this stuff gets more expensive, or let's have a tower block here. Solow's saying this stuff gets more expensive, we'll shift out of these products and into these. But now I'm saying, we don't want these emissions, so we want people to shift out of these products and into these. But do they want to shift? So the evidence shows we've shifted into these products, over time. If that's driven by a substitution effect, then sort of all we need to do is tax these emissions. These products will get more expensive and we'll shift the crop back. And we can all relax, the climate problem will be solved. But what if this is the driver? Let's take a break, okay, and I want you to think about it over the break. What What if the income effect is the driver of the shift into energy intensive stuff? Rich people like energy intensive stuff. How can we think about that in terms of climate? Have a think, but let's take a 7-minute break. Yeah. So we're here, yeah. But it's tying into question 4. So if this shift into energy intensive products, if that's been driven by a substitution effect, and all we need is, even if there are sectors without the alternatives, because there's plenty of sectors where we can shift to solar, right? Say. But there's a bunch of other sectors where it's tricky, like super tricky, like long distance flights, and if we want to be eating beef and stuff. So then it's not obvious what the alternatives are here. And there's definitely the efficiency, just like getting more efficient in the use of the inputs is also pretty much hopeless. Like, you can get small gains are possible, but it's not going to solve it compared to the rapid increase, say, in passenger flight. But if that whole thing is driven by a substitution effect, it's kind of saying, look, consumers are pretty flexible, we just put the tax on the emissions and they'll all stop flying, and they'll be pretty cool about it. Because that's the whole point about the substitution effect. It's like, oh yeah, we can have some of that, we can have some of the other. Oh, that got a bit more expensive, we'll do something else. But what if it's driven by an income effect? How can we interpret that? Or
Then you're not flexible. Then you have an acquired, or you have a taste for more energy intense goods if you gain some income.
right. So then, how can we link that to the EKC story? So what's the EKC story, according to what I've taught you in the course?
Pollution will increase as we get richer to a certain point where when we will start abating, or
Right, that's totally correct. But then why? What's the how do we why do we start abating, or why do we shift?
because we have more income and therefore are able to pay to make more.
We have
So
more
we have
income.
a higher willingness to pay for it
Right.
due to the higher income.
So that's like rich people like a clean environment.
Yeah.
But this is like rich people like flying. And if there's no clean way to fly, what's going to happen? It's like the unstoppable force and the immovable object, isn't it? We don't really know. Yeah, it's an open question. So if it's like a substitution effect, it's like then we can be pretty confident if we just get the policies in place, it's going to be cool. You know? But if there's a big element of an income effect, then we know for the long run, thinking about the EKC story, as we get richer, we're going to care more and more about the climate, because rich people like to have a nice planet to live on and are prepared to pay for it. And that should push us out of flying. But unfortunately, rich people like flying too, which are pushing us into flying. So then how's it going to go? Which wins out? We don't know. Maybe we'll choose to have a degraded planet with a wacko climate compared to what the natural climate would have been, but we were whizzing around, jetting around. Maybe that's the future sort of we want, or the rich people who control things want. Probably not what we want. But this is a sort of endogenous, this endogeneity problem here. Sample selection bias. Okay, do you get what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay. So, transition to a climate-friendly global economy could be a lot harder to achieve, or less likely to happen, if rich people like emissions-intensive stuff, and in sectors where there aren't, this should be green really, where there aren't green alternatives, then we've got a problem, haven't we? Questions, comments? I think what I've said here is I've not really thought about it in that way until now, linking the two stories. So you won't find it in the suggested answers, for instance. But the key thing, what you will find is like, if it's an income effect, then that's making it trickier. But then linking it to the EKC story, that's what I've just thought about today. It's kind of nice because then this question is EKC. So, super important. Again, this question. So what have we got here? If we're going to do a diagram, yeah, maybe you can just have a go at drawing a picture for this one.
A general question, do you want those kind of diagrams and the exam answers as well? Or?
It really depends. If it's mainly math, then it's totally up to you. But if I'm asking you to explain something, then it's likely to be a good idea. So this one you wouldn't need it. Okay, now I've worked out what the picture should look like. How are you getting on?
I am reading.
Okay. Peter Hedlund, so.
Yep, so you've got several of the key elements. Yeah, so that's the one thing we need to...
I don't know.
So it's pretty clear actually. There is a sort of right and wrong answer to that. From what you can see in the topic curriculum, where you should send the pollution. Right, yeah. Actually, I was thinking it should come from here, but of course it should come from here. But then where does it land?
Production, is it this way from where it lands on
Yeah,
production?
it lands in the production sector, doesn't it? Okay. We're running out of time, so I'm going to go to the cut to the chase, so to speak. Oh no, that's already wrong. I'm getting too much of a rush. And actually, this is a factory without a chimney, isn't it? But this one has a chimney. And the final good, some of it goes here, some here, and some here, yeah? And then we could think of the electricity sector or something, and then. And where's this stuff going? According to the model, it's affecting productivity in here, isn't it? So this is coming down here. Okie doke. And we've got perfect substitutability here. So this is R, that's called X1 and X2, I think. And the costs differ. So we've got W1 and W2, which is going to be effect. I don't know what to call these inputs now. I call these X and X, but this is like Q1 and Q2 or something. The relationship between X and Q is going to be linked to the W's, isn't it? Okay. Yeah, it's number one is leading to the emissions. And what's the flow of emissions? It's the same as X1, isn't it? Okie doke. And because we've got Y is AL times L to 1 minus alpha, R to the alpha, 1 minus psi D. Then adding a certain amount to D is going to knock off psi times this from Y. So the bigger this is, the bigger the damages of the given increment on D. So this is capturing the idea that willingness to pay for getting rid of pollution flows grows, in this case, linearly with the sort of overall productivity. Okie doke. And then there's a bunch of math, which I'm not going to go through. Maybe we can say a couple of things about it. The marginal social cost of using X1. What is that? Not mathematically, but conceptually, what is it?
Cost plus the damage.
Say again?
The input cost plus the damage from
Yeah.
using X1.
So it's the extraction cost or whatever it is. Do we call it extraction? Yeah, extraction cost. The input cost. I think you said input cost, didn't you? Which is also correct.
Yeah.
But extraction cost or input cost plus the damage cost. This is constant, this is growing. And for the second one, it's just the extraction cost, isn't it? Because there is no damage. And this, because this is lower than this, and this starts low, we start off using this one, but as this grows, at some point we're going to switch to this one. And the benefits are just equal, because they're perfect substitutes. Okay. So we'll look at C very, very soon. No, we'll look at C. I was thinking of linking back to the previous question, but that's just going to confuse you, I think. So let's just look at C. So give me some thoughts about C. Or have a think maybe, and then give me some thoughts. Think for just a minute or so, or chat to your neighbour if you like. start cleaning up while you're at it.
It's showing the exact pattern of EKC, right?
Yeah. Basically, it looks to substitute.
Or maybe, yeah, it will end quicker once we reach the point, but still.
Yeah, basically we will
Just
manage
drop.
until marginal cost of 1 equals marginal cost of 2, and then we will switch afterwards. If damage will start to take a toll on us,
Yeah.
then start
Du har inte ens svarat mig.
I think where it's not relevant is we really don't always know the damage.
No.
So how are you gonna tackle this? How would you tackle a question like that? Any thoughts? What were you guys saying? Or yeah, you were all saying different things. What?
We said that it looked quite a lot like an EKC, which have like some real evidence of actually existing for some pollutants. So it's pretty, well, it would end more drastic, right? Once we reach a certain level, it will be like we would stop use the harming or the polluting input at once. But yeah, but to understand like real economies, if we talk about carbon emissions, I would say that the problem would be that we don't really know, or maybe that it's hard. It's hard to know what the damage really are.
Right. So on the first point, shall I go there or not? You do actually get a gradual rundown because when you decide, oh no, let's not go there. It's fine. I think what you said basically makes sense, but I think in terms of answering the question, I would say you could say some general things, if you like, at the start, but I would quite quickly try to move to examples. So I'm just looking again at the question. Discuss the relevance of the model to understanding patterns of polluting emissions over time in real economies. So I think the best way to tackle this is not to talk in general terms, but to fairly quickly move on to saying, thinking about specific cases and saying, okay, in this case, it seems to fit like perfectly, perhaps. But in this case, maybe it's broadly capturing the main mechanism, but there's this and this going on too. And maybe you could maybe find a case where you're saying, oh, this just doesn't seem to fit at all. So give me some, assuming we're going to take that approach, give me some cases that we could talk about. Right, CFCs. Putting on there. Ozone. Give me some more.
You also talked about sulfur dioxide
Yeah.
in the UK.
Or UK and Europe. I'll probably talk mostly about the UK, but depending on what you've read and so on.
Those would be two working examples.
So a really straightforward one is lead. Lead in petrol. So these are ones where you can see the pattern and it fits pretty well, but there's sort of caveats for all of these. Maybe you should throw one in where it's like, whoa, we don't know. So you could say maybe CO2. to, you could also say, what's the classic one in Sweden? A more Swedish focused one, or a local one for Sweden, where it's like, come on, nothing seems to happen, the situation just doesn't, we've been talking about this for decades and it doesn't get better. More locally to Sweden. Eutrophication, yeah. We never talked about it in the course at all, but it's something we could talk about. It's just an idea that struck me now.
And would that be a case where it didn't work? But not
Well, to me the model works, but it, to me the model works in all of these, but there's different things you need to take into account. Maybe in this case there's stuff that isn't in the model. Here it's more just that, well, let's look at it. So CFCs, what happened? What does the data show?
Went off the cliff.
Say again?
It went off the cliff. We stopped
Yeah,
the
it went off the cliff. And pretty much, and what can we draw in here somewhere? This sort of international agreement. If you know what it's called, then you can put that in. But there is an argument that the mechanism behind this isn't really the EKC mechanism, as in the model. Because what else happened? Apart from just the valuation, our valuation of the ozone layer changing over time, or changing according to income, something else happened. 10, 15, 20 years before this. We discovered that the CFCs were causing the hole in the ozone layer, right? Up to then we didn't even know. So you could say, oh, it's just an information problem. You know, as soon as we found out, we got together, talked about it, decided what to do. But what supports the idea that the mechanisms in the model were important is that in those discussions, what attitudes did the different countries have? And we have talked about this probably very briefly in the course.
Some countries didn't want to implement it at all.
And which were those?
China.
The poorer countries, yeah. The richest countries with the highest GDP per capita were like, well, we have to deal with this. Countries with much lower GDP was like, whoa, no, we don't mind too much of thinning ozone layer, we want cheap bridges. But then the rich countries said, no way. So there, it's a very good fit, but there's also, what's not in the model is the information. That also, you get better information over time, and that can also lead to steep decline. So maybe if we'd had perfect information, we would have seen it go down earlier. And of course, in this and for this, we need the international negotiations to make it happen. It's tricky because we don't have an international government, and that makes it more complicated than in the model. So lead in petrol is just a really nice fit to the model. I would say, I don't think this adds too much, so I'm going to leave it. This was a really nice fit to the model. Here you could almost argue, the big question here is like, why did it take so long? It seems like, I think if you did, we haven't really done it in the course, and I haven't done the research, but I think you would find if you did the sort of socio-economic calculations, we should have been banning lead like 50 years before we actually did. You know, you can measure, if you do the sort of hard-nosed economics, you can see that kids being exposed to lead are getting lower grades at school, which is then affecting their future productivity, and the costs of that, you know, in just thinking in these incredibly narrow, hard-nosed terms, the costs of that are way more than the money you're saving by adding the lead to the petrol. And that was the case, I think, a long time before we actually got around to banning it. So you wonder, like, why was that? Maybe it's the power of the fossil lobby. Policymakers don't make the right decisions all the time. There can be long lags before they finally deal with stuff and make changes. The thing with carbon dioxide is, apart from the whole international negotiation thing, one thing that makes it messy is that there's so many different sources. So if you've got a certain cost based on an equation like this, or something like it, then at some point that means it's worth switching out of coal-fired electricity. A bit later it's worth switching out of petrol-driven cars, and later still it's worth switching to sort of hydrogen-powered steel refineries, etc. So because you've got CO2 emitted from a lot of sectors, you're never going to see this kind of thing, because it's going to come sector by sector, unless we delay so much that when we finally get around to doing something, it's like massive crisis and way too late, and then when we should have been on this path, maybe we'll be. So that would be, but on the first best path, you wouldn't see something like this for sure. You would see why don't we clean up the full thing? We'll finish. This will be the last thing.
Aren't we having problems with international agreement?
So it's again, this is an international agreement thing. But even without that,
It's an open resource, there's no ownership.
yeah, but that's all pollutants are kind of like that, aren't they? If we think of this story, if we go back to the model, so if we're focusing on the agricultural sector, so this is then the agricultural field, okay? If you like. So this is just a small part of the total economy. And what are these? It's actually really tricky to reduce emissions. There's no like, oh, we've got this agriculture which leads to lots of emissions, and we've got this alternative which is totally clean. So what about organic agriculture? Does organic agriculture lead to less leaching?
No.
Maybe beer. Oh, sorry, did you say, Janina? Who said
It
that?
doesn't, does it? It's like still a different kind of nitrogen polluter.
I mean, it depends, but it's very much not clear-cut anyway. That's at the very least you can say that. And especially if you measure per ton of agricultural production, then it's almost certainly, in most cases, will be more leaching. So it's like, there just aren't the sort of reasonably priced, super clean alternatives to switch to. Sure, there is stuff to do, you can do catch crops, etc., but it's expensive and doesn't make that much difference. It's like, So it's the cost-benefit story really is a big part of it, combined with all the international agreements and the difficulty of controlling what farmers do, and it's a super complicated problem. A bit of a sort of wicked problem.
det var det. I guess we can leave that going. Well, no, we're all here. I think I'll stop it.